Dear Congressman, thank you for this opportunity. The global agenda has shifted dramatically in recent times, as if the moral compass of the world has been reset. Just when it seemed we had reached a dead end and hope was fading, a sudden shift occurred. Now all eyes are focused on Istanbul meetings. I'd like to begin with the topic of Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky is preparing for Turkish talks. Putin is more hesitant. In your view, has Zelensky, through patience and diplomacy, succeeded in improving relations with him? Has he won this round?
Zelensky's doing probably the best he can with the options he's given. I mean, look, it's interesting because I hear people say, well, he needs to go to the meeting because he needs to show that Ukraine is the country that's interested in peace. And I got to tell you, everybody that really knows anything knows that Ukraine's the country interested in peace. They know that the Russians aren't. But to the extent he can keep showing that, that's important. And for Donald Trump, look, I mean, I have my views of Donald Trump, but just from the perspective of the United States of America, it's good that Zelensky is showing every chance he can that he wants peace, and that makes it probably more likely in kind of a hard to predict situation. That makes it a little more likely that we would actually continue to support Ukraine through this fight if it's beyond clear that Russia has no interest in stopping it or is simply trying to extract as much as they can.
The situation has changed drastically. Today, even China is urging Russia to play a constructive role in the ceasefire process, not to mention the visits of European leaders to Kyiv. Ukraine deserves a just and lasting peace. But can the allies and the so-called coalition of willing guarantee the outcome today? We're currently witnessing a display of European and American unity, but how stable is that alliance, especially given Trump's unpredictable nature?
Yeah, we don't know how stable it is. And this is where it's important for Europe to basically make it clear that they will stand with Ukraine and ultimately with Georgia, no matter what the United States does. Look, Europe is fully capable of building a defense infrastructure, of having political will and strength to push back against Russia. But in 80 years, Europe has basically relied on the United States to be that umbrella. And I wish the United States was staying there to be that umbrella. But we don't know. And so it is important for Europe right now to make the decision that they will stand up regardless of where the U.S. is. And I think, look, if they make that determination and they put down red lines that they won't back away from, every time the Russians will back down. Russia is an economy the size of a U.S. state, the size of a small European country. They've lost 1 million men in this war. There is no doubt that the West and Europe and the United States and Europe can win this with Ukraine if we have the right determination. So that's going to be up to Europe. Are they going to put down red lines they walk away from, or are they going to stick to them?
Is Putin in the final stage? Will he lose? What will determine that?
Look, I mean, Putin will absolutely lose in Ukraine if the determination of the Ukrainians and the allies, frankly, are to keep supporting the defense of the country. I mean, look, I used this as an example the other day. If when the United States attacked Iraq, 3 years later, we only occupied 18% of the country and we lost 1 million men in doing it, there's not a person in the world that would think that we were winning that war. And that's exactly what you see right now. Russia, on the day of the full-scale invasion, occupied basically 30% of the country. Now it's 19%. And they've lost 1 million men in a country that has a huge demographic problem. Russia will lose this war. They're simply trying to pretend like their victory is inevitable to try to extract as much as they can in negotiations. But if Vladimir Putin knows there will be either no negotiations or the West is putting down a red line, he knows he can't win. He simply cannot. And so, yeah, that's why I think it is so important for the West to basically be very clear about what their goal is. We all want to see an end to the war, but we don't want to see Ukraine in essence, lose their independence in that process.
If Ukraine stops fighting, it will lose its country. If Russia stops the war, peace will prevail. What will bring Putin to this decision?
Well, look, I mean, it'll be the last thing Putin wants to do because he's got his pride. He's got his vision of a sort of remade Soviet Union pretty much wrapped into places like Georgia and especially Ukraine right now. And so what it's going to take is an inevitability, an understanding that he is simply spending the lives of his people, that he's not gaining enough territory for the cost, and that the Russian people are ready to throw him out. They're ready to rise up against him. Ultimately, look, Putin is a smart guy. Let's not pretend like he isn't. He knows when something is futile or not worth the effort, and we can make that very clear that his efforts are not worth it. And that's the United States and Europe, but Europe can do this on their own as well.
The war in Ukraine has once again underscored and emphasized the strategic importance of Black Sea security for global peace. This naturally brings us closer to Georgia, raising a crucial question. How important is what kind of country Georgia will be?
Georgia occupies not just and I think this is important, that Georgian people and the people of the United States and Europe are very close. We're natural friends, natural allies. But Georgia occupies a very important transit route, a very important trade route, and a very important area. And so, yes, what Georgia looks like as a country is a very important question. Is it going to fall into the talons of Russia and be like so many of the other breakaway republics that are kind of given up their sovereignty and now are under the control of Putin? Or are they going to continue to stand strong for their independence? And I've got to tell you, what I'm seeing among the Georgian people is very inspiring. They're not giving up. They're standing up. And so, look, that and the Black Sea, I mean, the fact that the Russian fleet has been basically defeated in the Black Sea by Ukraine without a navy is incredible. And it goes to show how weak the Russians really and truly are.
Georgian Dream Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze has addressed an open letter to US President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance amid the unprecedented international isolation that the GD government faces. The letter goes on to express frustration with US sanctions against GD officials, which it says had been wrongly imposed for effectively preventing the attempted revolution and violence planned by the Biden administration and financed through US aid, and notes with disappointment that the sanctions remain in force.
Look, he's clearly against the West. Look, for however long, the Georgian Dream would pretend to be pro-West, and they would do things to look pro-West, but it was clear that, there was natural affection towards Russia, or at least towards corruption, or at least towards authoritarianism. That mask is off now. What they're doing to the people that are peacefully protesting what appears to be clearly a stolen election, is insane. And watching the people stand up against this is inspiring. When your prime minister, who needs a haircut, by the way, for God's sakes, when he continues to push back against the United States and Europe and sends like letters, in essence, crying and complaining about it, it shows that the voice of the Georgian people is resonating loud and clear. It's resonating loud and clear in the United States. And it shows that I think the Georgian people won't be defeated. And so if I was in the Georgian Dream right now, I'd be looking for a way out.
Who they addressed? What do you think, US or Russia?
I'm sure it was addressed to both, really. I mean, technically, of course, to the United States, but they know Russia's going to read it. They know that, they're pushing back on all this. So yeah, I think it's very clear that this was addressed to, in essence, both audiences, and Russia's going to be listening.
You led the Georgia-America Friendship Caucus for a long time and know well what's happening in our country. At this historical moment for Georgia, when European window is open, Georgian Dream is trying to close it. Ivanishvili is openly and shamelessly deviating from the declared Western course. essentially declaring America and Europe as enemies. Whose game is Ivanishvili playing?
Look, let me be very clear. The United States believes that people should have a right to determine the future of their own country. And so USAID does a lot to help people with food, to help people with understanding the importance of democracy. The Georgian Dream came along and they stole or are stealing the democracy from the Georgian people. I mean, it's clear they didn't win the election. It's clear there was ballot stuffing. It's clear there was fraud. And so it's clear that the Georgian people would stand up and say, this is wrong. Now, to hear, again, the guy that needs a haircut continue to talk about the deep state, it goes to show me that they are, it goes,
Do you really mean
are you,
his haircut?
yeah, haircut. He needs an absolute haircut. Yeah. Um, but look, what that goes to show me is that um, they're worried. And it goes to show that when they start to use things like deep state and all this kind of, drivel, that they're playing in conspiracy to try to win over or to try to win this battle against the people of Georgia. They're not fighting an outside power. The United States is not putting troops or intelligence into Georgia. They're fighting their own people. And I think they're going to lose that, in all honesty.
Georgian Dream first claimed that there would be no US sanctions. Now they are convincing their voters that sanctions are not painful at all. What is reality?
Well, they are painful. And, the United States could make sanctions painful for every Georgian. And we're not doing that. We're targeting individuals that are going after the Georgian people, that are stealing Georgian democracy. It's very painful for them. That's why it bothers them. If they didn't mind it, they wouldn't care.
Congress has already passed the Friend Act, Megobari Act. Jim Risch and Jean Shaheen are waiting for this bill in the Senate. Do you think Trump will sign this document?
Yeah, I certainly don't think he will veto it if it passes the Senate. And it also may end up, in many cases, things like this end up in broader bills, bigger bills. So whether it's reconciliation or something like that. So yeah, I do think there's a very solid chance that this gets done. At the same time, it should send a very strong message to Georgia. The fact that the country voted 380 to 60 something to support this, that the United States is on the side of the Georgian people, not Georgian Dream.
You personally know Kobakhidze, Garibashvili, Dream leaders. What was your reaction when you saw Kobakhidze in Iran next to Hamas and Hezbollah and in that hall where they were shouting death to America?
I mean, it wasn't surprising to me. It was sick to watch. And it reminded me that, look, the Georgian people deserve better than this. I mean, look, the Georgian people, the first time I went to Georgia was in 2011. And I remember just on that trip realizing that the people of Georgia are among the best friends to the United States and to the West, anywhere in the world. And so to watch that display of garbage, of terror, to me was sad, but it also was a reminder that this is a fight for the soul of our country, the world, and the Republic of Georgia.
I remember your address next to Kobakhidze, who criticized only Zelensky and Sandu. You wrote, now mention Putin at least once, Irakli. You know the man who invaded your country, killed people and still occupies it. Your real enemy is Russia, right?
I mean, look, this is what amazes me is you have a government right now that's trying to kiss up to a country that occupies a third of you. I mean, I even saw in his letter to the U.S. government again, going back and blaming Saakashvili for the war. It's like blaming the victim of a robbery for the robbery. It's like somebody attacks your house and you're blaming the homeowner. Like, no, Russia did this. Russia knew what they were doing. They did a false flag attack. And for the government of Georgia, the illegitimate government of Georgia, to try to blame the prior government and not the actual aggressor goes to show me without a doubt whose side they're on. And you see him now, you see the government, attacking Ukraine. By the way, this idea that we're trying to drag Georgia into the war in Ukraine is ludicrous. Ludicrous. The United States has zero interest in Georgian troops attacking Russia. We have zero interest in that. And it is insane that they would even try to use that as an argument. Again, it goes to show to me desperation.
They claimed that America was asking Georgia to open a second front, then propaganda picked up the global war party, and now they claim that the deep state is defeating both America and Europe.
Yes, yes. We're the deep state, the global war party. We really want Georgia to attack Russia. Look, if we wanted Georgia to attack Russia, it would have been done years ago. This is insane and silly.
You mentioned Putin's prisoner Mikhail Saakashvili, Georgia's third president, during whose time George Bush, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, three presidents visited Georgia. Do you think America should have done more to free the reformer and modernizer of the country and America's allied president from prison?
Yeah, absolutely, we should have. What's being done to him is awful. You can have disagreements with his politics, but I don't think there's anybody with a straight face that can say that Saakashvili didn't help Georgia put it on the map and stand strong to defend Georgia when they were being invaded. Brought the United States in to help at least morally defend Georgia during that. For him to be arrested because he's an enemy, again, that's the kind of thing you see in the Soviet Union. I do wish the United States and our allies would have done more and would do more, but it is what it is, I guess, at this moment.
Georgia's ruling party, Georgian Dream, kept urging voters to wait until January 20th, hoping things would change with Trump's return. But nothing has changed. What is Washington's current approach to the situation in Georgia, and could that approach shift with a change in administration?
I don't really know. I mean, it's hard to see what the position of the administration is. They're certainly not apparently on the side of Georgian Dream. And I think that's important for the Georgian Dream party to hear, for the Georgian people to hear, is if you believe that Donald Trump is going to come in and then all of a sudden support this illegitimate election in Georgia, apparently they were wrong. And so now they're going to have to deal with the voice and the protests of their own people. And it appears to me that the protests are getting bigger and bigger. And the weather's getting nice, by the way. So I don't know.
When we speak about Russian influence, I'd also like to ask about the Irakli deep sea port. The strategic project was handling to the Chinese company. Was it the first clear sign that the Georgian Dream government was pivoting toward the Russian-Chinese geopolitical dimension?
Yeah, look, from a port perspective or any infrastructure in a country, when a country comes in and builds it, particularly a country like China, they own you. I'm sorry, they own you. They control you. You want to talk about the U.S. deep state? When you're talking about USAID, which is a program that helps people, and then allow the Chinese to come in and own ports and own infrastructure, that's deep state, my friends. That is deep state. And you will be at the mercy of the Chinese government, the Chinese communist government, by allowing this. And this just goes to show you have a government and an oligarch that's interested not really in a strong independent Georgia. He's interested in getting his own money. He's interested in power. That's it. And I think that's pretty apparent to the Georgian people, too.
Do you think Ivanishvili will have to call new elections and release political prisoners?
I think as long as the pressure stays up, eventually, yes. I mean, you hear some discussion of that, obviously the opposition is very clear. We want to rerun the election with observers that can tell that it's fair. I mean, I think crystal clear about the video in one of the precincts of the guy running and stuffing the ballot box and, all those kinds of things. And so, yeah, I ultimately think that there will have to be a new election run. But again, that's up to the Georgian people. And I know that they're going to continue to make it clear that that's what they want.
Journalist Mzia Marlobeli is a political prisoner. She recently turned 15 in prison. This regime has persecuted media from the beginning. Tavari channel is an example of this. Today I'm speaking to you through the YouTube platform On Time for this reason.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's clear when you're a authoritarian country, the first thing you do is control the media. And that's what we're dealing with now. But look, the people will not be made ignorant. They can now see you through YouTube. They're going to find a way to get the information that they need to get. But it goes to show that this is a regime that is scared. How many times do I have to look on the internet and see pictures of men and women that have been beaten up by the police simply for having their voice heard? This is the kind of thing you see in It's the thing you see in the Soviet Union. It's not the kind of thing you should see in Georgia, and I think the people of Georgia will make that clear.
In final stage, I would like to return to Ukraine again. Is it possible to achieve ceasefire?
Look, I have a hard time thinking that there's going to be some miraculous ceasefire. You may see a ceasefire for a few days at a time. I think ultimately, by the end of this year, I think you'll see the war come to some version of an end. But I don't think we're necessarily near that yet. Would I like to be proven wrong? Absolutely. I would love to be wrong. I would love this war to end. But I think the big thing is that it cannot end. It has to end in a way that has a sustainable peace because we need investment in Ukraine to rebuild Ukraine. Investment won't come if there's no security guarantees. We need that kind of thing to happen. So that'll be the big question. As Ronald Reagan said, my favorite president, he said, we can have peace. We can have it this next second, surrender. But that was actually a warning against that. It's easy to get lulled into the idea of peace and surrender, but the reality of it is you need to stand on your feet and not live on your knees.
Thank you very much for these incredible words of your outstanding president, game changer and profound leader who ruined empire of evil. Thank you for this interview. It is crucially important in this crisis and in these dark times for media. What would you wish to our baby platform On Time?
Look, I just want to say, continue getting the truth out there. Obviously, what happened is discouraging, but don't be discouraged. Your audience platform will grow here. Get the message out. People are hungry for the truth. And when you put the truth in front of them, you will prevail. And so good luck and keep pushing.
Thank you for your continued support for the people of Georgia and the Georgian media, which is fighting on the front lines.